Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's live learning event, Discovering the PIC Activity in Grooper 2025. This is the sixth meeting in our DevNote series, which is designed to give you insights on the newest Grooper innovations. Today, we will explore a smarter, faster way to find one document from a set of similar documents. Thanks for joining us. My name is Brad Blood, and I will be the moderator for today's event. If you have any questions, you can send them in to the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer your questions as time allows. We're also recording today's meeting, and we'll be sending out a link to the video recording to everyone who registered for today's event. We will also be adding the video of the recording of this to our Grooper YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe to Grooper AI on YouTube to never miss any of these videos. Okay, today's speaker is Dylan Greenwood, the Director of Product Operations here at Grooper. Dylan is dedicated to educating Grooper users on the possibilities of intelligent document capture. With a background as an educator, his aim is to increase the understanding of the Grooper platform, leading to effective and efficient document processing solutions. His work includes many things, but includes designing Grooper University coursework and strong, robust documentation on the Grooper Wiki. Dylan, take it away.
Thanks, Brad. So I'm here to talk to you guys about a brand new activity in Grooper 2025 called PIC. So I want you to imagine a scenario that you may have been in yourself. Say you have a file with several documents in it, or a batch with several documents in it, and they contain versions of basically the same thing, the same kind of document. And your job is to figure out which one matters in one way, shape, or form, which one might be the most current version of the document, or which one is a more authoritative version of the document, or, more generally speaking, which one answers the question that you're trying to ask. We've never really been able to do that in a automated fashion in Grooper. Really, a human being would have to make that decision. The ability to analyze across documents in a set is not really something that's been doable in Grooper in the past. Instead, a human being would have to actually put eyes on each document and determine for themselves which one was the right one, given what they were trying to look for. The PIC activity is an attempt to let AI do that instead. So you basically give it a set of documents, you define which document types it can analyze, and tell it what you're looking for. And it picks the one that best fits, all based on a prompt that you configure in natural language. Very, very easy to set up and very, very easy to use. Now, this is a brand new feature, so I don't have thousands of real-world documents that we've ran the PIC activity against, because quite frankly, it's brand new, and we're actively looking for use cases where it will accommodate. But I'm going to give you an idea of the basic kinds of things you can use the PIC activity for, using some synthetic documents that I've generated. Any questions before I get into it?
None so far. Just a reminder to everyone that you can just send your questions in through the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Sometimes it's been hidden under the little more icon on the right. Sometimes it's hidden there, but if you will send those in, we will get those answered as soon as possible.
Perfect. So let's get into Grooper, and I'll show you some pretty simple examples to wrap our brains around this activity. So I'm going to detail a few different scenarios where the PIC activity could be used. One which attempts to find the most current version of a document, one which attempts to select which one has the highest authority, one which is the most complete version of a document, and one which is, the best fit evidence for what you're trying to find. Most current is definitely the easiest one to wrap our brains around, so that's the one I'm going to start out with. So I'm going to look at a batch of pay stubs. So in this scenario, you might be trying to attempt to find, given a list of pay stubs that somebody sent in a batch or a file, just which one's the most recent, because that's really the one that most matters if you're trying to do something like income verification, right? So they're kind of out of order here, but which one actually presents the most current one is this one right here. You can tell by the date. Period ending is the most recent of the periods that I have in this selection of documents. So it should be pretty easy for an AI to figure out. Certainly would be pretty easy for a human being to figure out, given the most recent date of these documents. You would say, yeah, this is the one I'm looking for, right? And that's exactly what it does. I've picked a model here. I picked a fairly fancy one, but quite frankly, I didn't have to because, again, this is a pretty easy job. And given it some very, very simple instructions. Just pick the best document to verify current income. I also could have said pick the most recent document, but you get the idea. In this case, the best document to verify income is also the most current one. Then, very, very critically, to set this up, I have selected a content type. So I have a pay stub document type here in my example set of content types in this content model. So that is the document type in this batch that are going to be analyzed. The pick activity will pick from one of these types. And then you've got some things that the pick activity can do once you've picked the right document. We're going to start off with flag selected document. This is really useful for a number of reasons. Number one, it's just going to put a flag on the document it picked. Great. And number two, it's going to provide a reason for why it picked it. So this is very, very helpful for anybody who's troubleshooting the pick activity for sure, to make sure that you know what the pick activity did and why it did it, but also could be, part of a larger workflow. Once a document is flagged, you can pass that on to a human being to put eyes on it to verify that the pick activity picked the right one. Kind of clues them into, a starting point to make that selection process themselves, right? Or it could be routed using various routing needs like should, submit, or next step expressions. All right, so I'm going to go to this activity tester and I am going to select this batch, and I'm just going to run it. It shouldn't take too long. What it is going to do is it is going to hand an AI all of these documents, pay stub. It's going to flag it. It did flag the right one. It says, yeah, it's the most recent because its period is such, and for verifying current income, that's the best choice. There you go. Did exactly what it was supposed to do. Let's see if I can trick it, maybe a little bit more. I've got a slightly more real world example here. Various pay stubs, and at some point in this batch, right here, the user switched job, or the employee switched jobs here. So this is the most recent pay stub from their first job. So obviously it's got a higher year-to-date gross. Then they started a new job here, lower year-to-date gross. And really, this is truly the most recent pay stub and would be the best one to verify this person's income, right? All right, let's see. Is pick going to pick it? We'll run this. And yeah, sure enough, my dumb attempt to trick the AI did not work. It was smart enough to know, yeah, I'm just looking for the most recent period. Okay, any questions before we go on to some other examples?
Nope, none so far.
Okay, so next we're going to look at picking the highest authority. Here we have several NDAs that have been signed by different people in an organization. And, if you had this scenario where you had somebody that was signing a document, or two people that were signing a document, and it really, really mattered who from your organization signed it, you would probably want to pick, well, yeah, it doesn't really matter if here an administrative assistant signed this NDA because they have no authority to do so, right? But if the chief legal officer signed this NDA, yeah, that's probably going to be more binding, right? So this is exactly what I'm going to ask the pick activity to do. Just pick the document that is signed by the highest authority. Very, very simple instructions here. I've set my content type to NDA. And here in the disposition, I've gone ahead and flagged the selected document so we can see that reason. But I've also done something else. So you have the option to run some data rules on the document that was picked. And this is a very, very simple thing you could do with data rules, basically update the document's data, which is exactly what I'm doing with this data rule here. So in this case, for this NDA document, I've got a really, really simple content model with a very simple field, is highest authority. So all of these default to false. All this data rule is doing is setting that value to true. So the pick activity will pick the right document, and then the data rule will execute. In this case, setting that value to true, indicating the document is of the highest authority, right? Obviously, you could do much more complicated things with data rules, but this is a pretty simple and probably pretty common way this activity will be used. So let's test it out and make sure it works. got our batch, run that pick activity on it. And let's see. Yep, that's the chief legal officer. All the others rank below the chief legal officer. So the pick activity was smart enough to identify the highest authority. And did that data rule get applied to it? Well, hey, let's check the document's data here. Yep, sure enough, it did. Another, what I would imagine is a very, very common use case for this type of activity are scenarios where you're given, say, a packet of standard or semi-standard forms that are filled out over a period of time. In scenarios like this, you often run into issues where, the form might be partially filled out earlier on in the file. Later on the file, it's more filled out, or there might be something that, identifies the document as more complete in one way, shape, or form. In those cases, you usually want to find, given this sort of hodgepodge of partially filled in documents, the one that's most complete, right? So to simulate that scenario, I've just got some medical intake forms here. So this would be, a standard patient intake form. Here, we've got it, and not a lot of data has been filled out. Here, we've got it. Yeah, it looks like some more data has been filled out. Here, looks like, probably everything there is filled out. And here, I don't know. It looks like all of it's filled out, but I'm lazy. I don't want to figure out which one is fully filled out. I want AI to do it for me. Cool. That's exactly what Pick can do for me. So I am going to, again, do something very simple here. Give it some simple instructions. And much like with any AI feature in Grooper, this is how I recommend people start out. Start simple, and if you can give it less and get the result that you are attempting to achieve, usually that's better for the AI. AIs will often run into problems when you give them way too many instructions. So if you can do it with less, do it. If you find through testing that you have gaps that you need to instruct the AI on further, that's where you go back and re-instruct it to improve this over time. So simple instruction for a simple use case. Pick the most complete version of the document. And I've got my content set to intake partial. And in this case, I'm going to do something different. The one disposition that we haven't looked at yet. I'm going to assign it a new content type. So you'll see in my content model here, I've got an intake partial type and I've got an intake complete type. And I'm going to assign it this different content type, intake complete. And we also have this property here, keep existing data. This is probably pretty obvious, but to make it more obvious, I'm going to turn that to false from now. And we'll see why you need this, or why you might want this anyway. So I've assigned it this intake complete type, and I've set complete keep existing data to false. All right, so I'm going to run the pick activity on this batch. Okay, we'll see very clearly it changed the document type here to complete. It's flagged it because we set that Boolean property, and it's giving us a reason why the AI thinks that this is the most complete version of the document. Okay, cool. Now, as far as that keep data Boolean goes, this is why you want to consider using it. In this case anyway, these documents actually play make-believe here because we don't have the process in front of me, but the documents have completed an extract operation. So obviously some data has been collected, right? Here, it's collected the fields that have been filled in, not very many. Here, it's collected more because more are filled in. Here, obviously collecting more because more are filled in. When you assign a document a type in Grooper, by default, if you don't do anything else, well, it's just going to wipe out any pre-existing data. Could be problematic. It definitely would be in this scenario, right? That's the whole reason why that Boolean is there. Keep existing data, turn that to true, because these two document types share a data model, right? The data model belongs to the parent content category, so they inherit all of those same fields. Because that is the case, if we run it on this batch, hey, all that data is kept. So you don't have to re-extract the document or anything like that. It will keep whatever data it can. Any questions about that before we look at our last couple of examples?
None? No, none so far. Thank you, Dylan.
Excellent. So our last example is one where you might actually not be looking for, okay, differences between one type, say the most current or highest authority, most complete, whatever, but one that provides the best evidence of a collection of different document types. And that is something that the pick activity can do. So we'll go back to our income verification scenario. And in this case, we actually have different documents of different types. We've got a W-2, which might be used to verify income. We've got a pay stub, which can be used to verify income. We've got a letter from an employee or employer with verification of employment to verify income. And we've got a bank statement. Each one of these documents could be used to verify somebody's income. But probably one of them is better than the other, right? So I'm going to have pick determine that for us. So I've given it, again, very, very simple instructions. In fact, the same instructions that I did for my very first example, just pick the best document to verify current income. And instead of selecting an individual document type, I've selected the parent content category. So here is how you would configure the pick activity to pick among different document types. You would pick, the parent for the various types. In this case, content category, or you could scope it to the entire content model as well. Just depends on, what group of document types you are attempting to analyze. In this case, I'm just going to flag the selected document, nothing fancy here. Run it against all of these different document types at the batch level. And hey, there we go. It tells us that it picked the pay stub and tells us why. Best choice to verify current income is the most recent pay stub, yada, 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 yada. Directly evidence current income. W-2 reflects prior income, right? So it's stuff in the past, stuff may have changed. Verification of employment states salary, but, is it what they're actually getting paid kind of there? Is the idea there. And a bank statement shows deposits, but it doesn't have that full payroll detail. So yeah, I don't know a whole lot about income verification personally, but that certainly makes sense to me. So that kind of wraps up most of what I want to show you here today over the picked activity. Some basic examples of how you might use it, or scenarios where you might use it, something to verify the most current document, the document of the highest authority, the most complete document, or, best evidence according to your needs, some question you're trying to answer. And we talked about the different dispositions you can do once the document is picked as well. You can flag it, you can assign it a content type, and you can run data rules against it. I've got one other somewhat related example to show you before we wrap up. But before I get into that, I'll give one more pause to see if we have any questions.
None so far. Thank you, Dylan.
Okay. Well, to wrap it up, I want to show you something. It's a slightly more real world use case. And I want to show you this because it uses some interesting techniques that we've actually talked about over the past several webinars. So this is one of the reasons actually why we went down the rabbit hole of developing the pick activity. One common issue in the oil and gas document processing world has to do with identifying the controlling version of a oil and gas lease in what's known as a lease packet. So you'll get documents like this, which is just a huge PDF with a bunch of documents related to an oil and gas lease. And you'll have the actual oil and gas lease itself. And you might have some other supporting documents around that lease, other legal documents, payments from one oil and gas company to the lessor, just a whole lot of documents about that lease, right? Often, when you have these lease packets, you'll actually have multiple oil and gas leases embedded within the file. The terms of that lease may change over time. So, might have an addendum that alters the agreement in some way, shape, or form. And, one thing that oil and gas companies who are processing this type of file often want to know is what's the controlling version of the lease. So I've got 3 different versions of the lease. Well, what's the controlling version? Which one is actually up to date, most recent, or has the most complete legal language involved in it? And the pick activity was definitely designed to identify something like the controlling version of a contract. Where this gets a little more interesting than, say, just the basic scenarios that we provided up here, is we're using a lot of the tech that we've discussed recently to do this. So we are using Azure DIOCR to get the raw text data. We are only using the pre-built read engine, but that's still the most up-to-date, best OCR engine that we have to get most accurate text data from a document. But leases are interesting, and any legal contract filed with a county clerk is interesting because a lot of times the evidence that you're looking for when you're trying to determine the controlling version of a contract like this are actually more visual elements. So aside from just the raw text data, you've also got stuff like, let's see if I can find one on this document, filing stamps with a county court office. So if the document isn't filed with the county office, well, has that document actually been executed yet? If it hasn't been executed, is that the actual version? Similar situation with signatures, right? If you've got a oil and gas lease document that hasn't been signed, well, that means functionally nothing, right? Doesn't actually make it a controlling version if the lessor and lessee haven't signed it, right? So these are visual pieces of information that are also important to determining this very, very, very simple question. What's the most controlling version of an oil and gas lease document? So we actually have two sets of information that are important here. We have the raw text data, which may be used to make that decision, but we also have those visual data that were collected from a VLM using that VLM analyze activity. It looks like we might have a question, so I will pause there before I continue.
Yeah. Joe, does PIC have to run after OCR, classification, and extraction?
Yes, is the realistic short answer. It would definitely have to run after classification because picking a content type is very critical to configuring this. You know, you have to tell the pick activity which type of document that you are trying to pick from. You know, it gets probably a little bit more nuanced in terms of, does it need to run after extraction? Certainly not, unless that was part of the data that was being used to make the determination, which kind of rolls into what I'm about to talk about. In terms of what an AI needs to answer the question, it has to be fed some kind of quote. And by default, the quoting method that Grooper uses, the data about the document that Grooper uses to hand to the AI, is just the raw text of the document. So in that case, yeah, it's got to be OCR'd, right? If the quote that you're handing the AI is the text data, well, if no text data is handed to the AI, there's nothing it can analyze, so there's no way it can pick, right? But there are multiple quoting methods available in Grooper, and this one's actually using two. Before I get into that in more detail, Joe, do you have any follow-up, or does that answer your question for now?
Looks like that's good for now, but I will let you know if he has a follow-up.
Okay. So this one actually uses two. For the most part, most kind of normal uses of document quoting, you're using one. So you're either just handing the raw OCR text. If you were on our Azure Document Intelligence webinar, you might be handing it that DI layout version of the document. Or if you were on our Analyze webinar, you might be handing it that JSON file that was generated by VLM Analyze. In this case, we're actually handing it two. So we're handing it what is called the extracted quote, which is really just the raw text if you don't configure it. And we're handing it a JSON file that was generated by VLM Analyze. So this is how, whether you're talking about PIC or really any other AI-enabled feature, this is how you use document quoting to supply multiple pieces of information about the document. And there are other ones as well. Data values might be an interesting one for the pick activity. This will supply the AI with the extracted data. So if the pick activity needed to, say, run after extract and needed to evaluate what should be picked based off of extracted data, you would use the data values quoting method. But in our scenario, we want the raw text handed by the extracted method, and any of that VLM data, that visual data about, say, the filing stamps or the signatures that we got from VLM Analyze. And with those two pieces of information, this pick activity is, basically able to use more information to make that decision, not just the raw text, but also those filing stamps and signatures as well. So we get a pretty robust description here. It's fully executed. It's got signatures, yada, 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 right? Okay, I think that about wraps it up on my end. Before I fully wrap things up, I do want to pause and just ask if we have any other follow-up questions.
None for now. And Joe said that you covered his question, so thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I do want to thank you guys for coming to this webinar. Again, the pick activity, it's brand new. We would certainly like to know how you guys are interested in implementing this in your solutions and get any kind of feedback you've got about your experiences with this activity. So please do reach out. I would love to explore this activity more with you as well. And also, I want to mention something new that we're doing with these webinars. We've gotten requests from various users, whether they're internal or from you guys who are clients, to basically have the projects and batches that we use in these webinars so that you can bring them into your own environments and see how we configured things and experiment with them further. And we are going to start, or actually we have started, posting all of these assets on Grooper Exchange in the downloads and resources section. So I've backfilled all of our previous webinars from this year. So if you're looking for, hey, that Azure Document Intelligence webinar, I want to look at the projects you used in that, you can go here and find them and download them directly. I've also got links to made a little typo there, I'll fix that, links to the full video when they're available too. And that includes today's webinar as well. So obviously the video isn't up there yet because we're still in the webinar, but you can come here and download the project and batches that we've been looking at today and, start experimenting yourself with these.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan. Remember that we'll also be emailing out a link to this video in the next couple days, and we'll be adding it to the Grooper YouTube channel also. If you're ready to explore any new further ways Grooper can help you or your organization, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, Dylan, or anyone else on the Grooper team. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.